everyone. This is the Ophthalmology Business Podcast, where we help you develop your ideal practice with the help of other doctors and experts. The topics we cover include marketing, management, leadership, recruitment, HR, mindsets, and more. I'm Sarah Duval, one of the co-hosts of the podcast. Every listener of this podcast is welcome to join the Ophthalmology Business Academy at www.obacademy.org. The membership is on us, and it's our gift to you. Today, I'm excited to talk to Amanda Turner, Director of Operations at Austin Retina Associates, about cultivating a culture of feedback and communication. So let's jump in. Amanda, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey into ophthalmology.
Sure. I started in ophthalmology about 10 years ago, and I've been in retina the whole time. I've been with Austin Retina for 10 years. I started off as a technician, and I kind of worked my way up into the role that I'm currently in. I did scribing for a little while, and I was a clinic supervisor for about 5 years. And I actually just recently moved into this role as director of operations a couple of months ago. So it's still fairly new to me, but I've been in middle management for a long time. And it can definitely be a tough role to have. So I love using all of the resources that are out there for us to kind of learn from each other and figure out how we can do things better for our employees.
Nice. So that's kind of like my story too, in that I've been with the same practice the whole time. And do you find it's true? I know I've joked about this with other people before, but it's like once we get into ophthalmology, like nobody leaves. It's like a cult or something. You get into ophthalmology and you never leave.
Yeah, it's such I don't know how you feel about it. I'm sure it's very similar, but it's such a rewarding experience getting to make such a difference in your patients' lives. And even though I'm not directly on the floor a lot anymore, the things that we do as leaders of the organization, it still has huge impact on our employees and our patients. And so it's extremely rewarding. And I can't ever see myself moving off and doing something else now that I've been in it like this.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's perfectly said. So, all right, so let's jump in. Today we're talking about cultivating a culture of feedback and communication, right? I don't think that that's easy for some people. So what are your thoughts, Amanda, on why are feedback and open communication so important?
I am a huge believer that everything really boils down to communication. You cannot have clear expectations for your staff if you don't talk to them about those expectations and if you don't communicate with them on how they are doing. So we can't expect somebody brand new to come in and meet our expectations without having a conversation with them and communicating with them on a regular basis on what is expected of their role, and also hard skills, but also soft skills. What's expected of them as a person when they're coming into the office. So, feedback is a lot of people think it's like a dirty word, right? I don't like to give feedback. I don't want to say, oh, I was given feedback, because it makes us feel bad. But if you turn it around and if you make feedback a good thing, and if you talk about feedback being a gift, then it changes everybody's perspective. And it is a really hard thing. And even we aren't perfect at it yet. But I would say over the last 5 years or so, we've gone through this change of really wanting to have a fantastic culture and a fantastic working environment. And this has been one of the biggest things that we've done to help us get to this new point of having a really great working culture, is empowering ourselves and our staff to give each other feedback.
So how did you do that then? Like, what are some of the things that you can do, that you have done, and that other practices could do to make feedback and communication such a strong, integral part of the culture?
So we started really, I think one of the first things that you can do is start by setting that expectation for your staff. And you can really call it out and say, hey, we may not have been the best at this in the past, but we're recognizing that now, and moving forward, these are what our expectations are going to be. We're going to communicate with each other. The biggest thing for me is one-on-ones, having regular routine one-on-ones with your staff so that you can have a safe space to have conversations and to give them feedback and to communicate with each other. One-on-ones are a really hard thing to do when you're a middle manager and you have a lot of direct reports. Before I moved into the position that I'm in now, I had a little over 30 direct reports. And I think generally, when people talk about one-on-ones, they say, oh, you should have a one-on-one once a week or once every other week with your direct reports. And if you have a lot of direct reports, that's kind of impossible to do them so frequently. So you can tailor them to work for what you need it to be, right? So if I have 30 direct reports, not all of them need as frequent touch points with me, right? Some of them I can follow up with in 6 weeks because they're very stable employees and they've been here a long time and they're not new in their role. Some of them I do need to follow up with every 2 weeks because they're extremely new in their role and they don't have those expectations set for them yet. So really, one of the best things you can do is one-on-ones. And then the other thing is encourage your staff to give each other feedback and to be open to getting feedback themselves. If you are the only one who's giving feedback and you're not encouraging your staff to also be a part of that process, then it's not really a two-way street and they're not ever going to feel comfortable getting that feedback from you.
So I can think about certain people in my own organization, and I'm sure that any listener will automatically hear what you just said and think about certain people in their organization. And I'm thinking about what you just said about encouraging your staff to give each other feedback. When you started doing that at Austin Retina, I imagine it didn't go over very well with certain people at first because unfortunately, right, we all have the negative Nancys and the people who are automatically going to take offense to it. Instead of using it as a learning opportunity, they're going to think that someone's trying to tell them how to do their job or whatever. How did you kind of get around that? How does that conversation look?
Yeah. So when we first started this, I would say that a lot of our time as middle managers was spent mediating conversations with our employees, because you're right. Somebody would try to offer feedback to somebody else and it would be taken the wrong way, or maybe they actually said it, in an offensive way instead of in an encouraging, teaching way. And so then they would come running to us and say, oh my gosh, this happened and it really upset me and I'm not sure what to do. And so we bring both of those people together with the manager and we say, hey, let's talk about this and let's figure out how you can get to a common ground. The bottom line is we're all here for the same reason. We want to serve our patients and we want to save sight. That's what we have to focus on. All of these other things are just things that we're doing to make those experiences better. So if I have to say, oh, Sarah, hey, when you checked this patient's vision, you forgot to do their pinhole or whatever. People sometimes they don't like to hear that because we don't like making mistakes. That's our nature. But instead of taking that personally, we try to view it as, okay, yes, I can absolutely try to do that better next time. And it's a really hard thing to do. Sitting here talking about it, it's a really hard thing to do. But if you take the first steps to get into it and you again set those expectations for your staff and then you're holding everybody accountable to those, you can make baby steps, but it's not going to happen overnight.
So talk us through then, how do you start making these changes? What are the baby steps, the actual first thing that we do to implement this?
You communicate with your staff and you say, hey, this is going to change. So I think when we first started all this, I think, like I said, it's been about 5 years since we decided, hey, our culture isn't exactly where we want it to be. Let's try to figure out how we can make it better. And it's not just feedback and communication, right? There's so many other things that go into having a great culture, but this is a really big piece of that. And so you have to communicate and you have to open that up to your staff and you have to say, hey, we've recognized that maybe this is an area that we can improve on. And so we want to do that. And here's how we're going to do it. Your managers are going to start having O3s with you. We're going to start giving each other feedback and we're going to have a culture of failure here where it's okay that you made mistakes. And we're going to give you feedback and then we can work together to fix those mistakes. We try really hard. If somebody makes a mistake here, it's not like oh my gosh, you made this huge mistake and you're in really big trouble and you're going to be punished. It's nothing like that. It's like, hey, this happened. We want to bring it to your attention and we want to see what we can do moving forward to make it better. So really the number one step, the number one thing that you could do is to just start communicating and lay it out for your staff and be open to them communicating with you and giving you feedback as well. and being open to making those changes, which is another really hard thing to do. But you can't expect them to be open to feedback if you're not as well.
So did you call it a culture of failure?
Yeah, culture of
Oh,
failure.
I like that.
Yes.
I've never heard that before. Did Austin Rentner make that up or?
Oh, I'm sure we didn't. I'm sure we heard it from somewhere, but it's even my CEO, she's fantastic, and she is the person who I feel like kind of started this. We don't want people to be scared to make mistakes. We hire for character. We don't hire for skill. So a lot of the people that we bring on here are brand new. They don't have ophthalmology experience. A lot of them don't even have healthcare experience. And we don't want people to come in and be afraid to try. We want people to come in and know, okay, if I make a mistake, it's going to be okay. Somebody's going to talk to me about it and tell me the way that I should do it. And then I'm going to learn from that and get better. So we have the culture of failure, and it's, it's not perfect, right? We still get frustrated and stuff still happens. But for the most part, we kind of embrace that, oh, you made a mistake. That's okay. Let's figure out how to fix it and move on.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love that. Okay. So here's a big one, right? How do you make sure that you aren't the problem?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. A lot of times, especially being a people manager who has a giant number of direct reports, without even knowing it, sometimes we are the problem because we're not spending enough time with our direct reports. We're not giving them the touch points that they need. We're not setting clear expectations. And then all of a sudden, we've created this problem that we didn't even know we were creating. So I think number one, you need to take care of yourself. It's like that saying goes when you're on an airplane and they say, oh, if the oxygen masks come down, put yours on first and then put it on your kid, right? You have to do that at work. You have to take care of yourself. You have to make sure that you're practicing self-care, and you are coming into work the best that you can. And then after that, you have to be open to creating the environment that you want from your employees. So if you want them to be open to feedback and you want them to be open to change, you also need to be open for those things. And they have to see that, right? I think at one point we were doing staff surveys that we sent out. And this was kind of before we started this whole process. A lot of the feedback that we got was, I don't want to do that survey because I put these comments on there and nothing ever happens. You guys don't do anything with my feedback. And I'm sure a lot of people hear that. And it's not that we don't want to do anything with the feedback, but sometimes it's very overwhelming and we don't really know what to do with the feedback, or we don't communicate. We actually did make changes, but we don't communicate that with everybody. So that's the other one, is when people give you feedback or when people give you suggestions, even if you can't move forward with whatever that was because of whatever reason, you still have to communicate, hey, this was suggested to us, and unfortunately we can't do it because of X, Y, and Z, but we wanted to let you know that we did put some thought and effort into it. So now when we have our company surveys that go out, we follow up on all of the recommendations that were given to us. Whether we can put them into action or not, we still follow up because we don't want our employees to think that their concerns or their suggestions are falling on deaf ears.
I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges, is that it can be very overwhelming. You do, on the one hand, the practice owners or the CEO or whatever the head of your practice happens to be, in theory, they want staff feedback and they want open communication, but then they don't do anything about it. And a lot of times it's not even communicated with the staff why nothing is done about it. And it's very frustrating. I am not the head of my practice. I am not an owner. I am not the CEO. So I'm a little more in the middle management. And I can speak for myself and other middle managers and the staff below us that it's extremely frustrating, and it really does affect the culture very negatively.
Mhm.
So, would you have any advice to a listener who might be in that similar situation where you in the middle management might realize that, hey, this really has to change, but there seems to be some resistance from the top?
Mhm.
Putting you on the spot here, but can you I don't know if Austin Retina dealt with that part at all, or if all of this came from the top initially, but what advice might you give to somebody who wants to make change to positively impact the culture and is just met with such resistance?
Yeah. We absolutely did used to be that way a long time ago. And I think that's part of why we started making all of these changes. We used to be a very top down company, meaning somebody at the top would have an idea and then that would just get pushed down. And we didn't ask for the day to day workers' feedback. So if we changed something with the workup process or with how, the workflow or something like that, they would just come up with the idea and we would just all have to make those changes, whether we felt like it was the best change in reality or not, instead of us asking, hey, we see that there's this kind of problem. What do you guys think we could do to fix it? And that is a very difficult challenge if you're kind of that middle manager and you don't feel like you have the support to go to your boss and say, hey, this is a problem. But that is the best advice I could give, is to have a very frank, upfront conversation with your boss or with all of the department heads and say, hey, I feel like this is a problem. And I really feel like we could make a difference if we started making some of these changes. And I would really like to move forward with that. Sometimes the boss is the problem. I'm lucky that that's not what happens here. And we're able to put in all of these changes to really kind of create this better culture. But I'm totally, I totally understand that not everybody has that. And it's really difficult, but unfortunately, the only way to change it is to bring it to light and to have a conversation about it in a very upfront way, which can be very scary and very difficult to do.
I mean, yeah, I had another question for you. I'll go ahead and ask it. How do you create trust within your team so that feedback is not always perceived as negative? I think we've sort of started touching on this a little bit, but I thought I'd ask you anyway, and we'll hit it head on here.
Yes. So trust is a big one. You're not going to be able to create these relationships with your employees if they don't trust you. And so really, I know I've said it already, but really the one-on-ones are the best way, in my opinion, to start developing those relationships with your staff so that they know that they can trust you and that they can come to you. Another really big way is for them to see you showing humility. So when I make a mistake, I own up to it and I apologize and I say, you know what, you're absolutely right. I could have handled that better. And I'm going to, I will make sure that I incorporate that in the future. That really goes a long way if they can see you being humble. We are not perfect. None of us are. We're all human. We all still make mistakes. And it's okay for them to see us making mistakes and us recognizing that we made those mistakes.
Mm-hmm. It's very hard to trust a practice owner or a CEO when they're so closed off to feedback, when you don't feel, let's say, safe to go to them and to have these conversations. It's really, really tough. It's really tough. I mean, it's hard to trust somebody that you feel like you can't go to, and have an open conversation, because like as middle managers, right, we have the people above us who will certainly tell us when we've done something that they don't care for, when something was done incorrectly, or when one of our direct reports. But it's not easy to go to the person above us and to say, hey, I really think that the way that your lack of transparency or your lack of communication regarding what you're asking from us, that's really tough. When you put the suggestion box, or however your company does it, people are doing suggestions for what? If they're never following up on it.
Yeah.
It really creates a lot of toxicity.
Absolutely, it does. And that's such a terrible thing, right? I mean, I would say, like I said, the best piece of advice I could give somebody who's dealing with a situation like that, and I know that it's not easy, but at some point, somebody's going to have the really hard conversation with that person to say, hey, it really feels like you're not open to change, or you're not open to whatever it is that's the problem. And I would love to see if we could work together to figure out how we can change moving forward, because I feel like it's affecting our culture. And this is not a great place to work because of that. And we can absolutely turn it around. It will be hard work, but we can do it because, we need to for our staff and for our patients.
I was just thinking of that saying that floats around LinkedIn or Facebook or what have you. And it's something to do with people don't always leave for more money or something like that. I think you know where I'm going with this, even though I'm totally destroying it. It's something about people leave managers. And
people don't leave jobs, they leave managers.
Yeah. And it's
those, they make me cringe because they don't have, we should all want to be the manager that people don't want to leave. And it's really easy for me to sit here and say that, right? But it's a very difficult thing to do. When I first started as a people manager, it was probably one of the toughest years of my life. Like it took me a full year, I feel like, to find a groove and to figure out how to talk to people in a way that didn't upset them. And I did attend it's called Manager Tools. It's a conference that's offered with Manager Tools. That's the name of it. And they're ones who were really big on the one-on-ones, but they also talk to us about tailoring your communication. I can't talk to you the same way that I could talk to somebody else because you might perceive it in a completely different way than the next person. So I had to build those relationships with my staff so that I knew when I talk to Sarah, this is how I need to say things to her. And when I talk to Susan, this is how I need to say things to her. Even though I'm telling them both the same thing, I'm saying it in a different way. So that way it's not coming across in a way that I don't intend for it.
And that's kind of an art. It is sort of an art to be able to do that because there are some managers out there that just they don't know how to finesse. They don't know how to do that. They literally just say it however they want, and they don't care how it's perceived. So it's hard.
Very hard. And I've been doing it for 6.5 years and I'm still not perfect at it. Right. And that's the thing is like all of these things that I'm saying, they're very hard things to do. But if you're making the conscious effort to start them and to work on them, then you're already doing more than you were before, right? And it's really never going to be perfect because we're all human. We all still make mistakes. Just today I was talking to somebody and I had to give them feedback and it was a difficult conversation, but we learn from those and we move forward and we try to do better. And if we can have the frame of mind that I'm not perfect, I'm going to make mistakes, but we're all in this together, then it really goes a long way. But I understand that some people don't have that. And so that's why you have to kind of get everybody on the same page. It would be fantastic if, I don't know what people do in their practices. We have department head meetings every Thursday where all the department heads get together and we talk about management things, right? If you do that at your practice, this is the ideal space to bring something like this up. Hey, I think we have a problem with our culture and I would love to make some changes and I want to get everybody's thoughts on it and then see where that conversation goes.
I like it. So start with your department heads or your management team, make sure that you get all of you on the same page and then start the baby steps.
Right.
You laid out earlier.
Honestly, physicians too. And I know that can be difficult. But everybody, if you really want to make this change and you really want to, have a better working environment, everybody needs to be on the same page. And that includes the physicians too.
And how many physicians do you have for your practice?
11.
11. Okay. Yeah. So that's never easy either. Dealing with 11 different personalities.
It's very difficult to get them all on the same page. And I will say it doesn't happen very often, but there have been a couple of, rallying cries over the years where we say, listen, this is a problem and we need to do better. We need to be better. And, they all get on board for that. And, like I said, nobody's perfect. We have to kind of remind people along the way of what our purpose is and why we're here. But, in the last 5 years, we have made a really big impact on our culture. And I'm happy to say that we've made a huge difference and that our culture is so much better than it was before. When I first started here, it was the kind of place when you walked in, it was like, oh, she's the new girl. We don't like her until she proves herself. Right. It was like that very weird, awkward interaction. And now I'm so happy to say that we don't have that here. We have a very welcoming, warm culture. And I really want to help other people get to that too, because No, it's not easy, but it is doable.
So Amanda, if someone hears this podcast and it resonates with them and they think,
Mhm.
gosh, I really, really need to do that in my practice. Are you open to maybe to helping people? Is it okay if they reach out to you?
Yes, I would love that. Like I said, it's a very hard road, and I feel like sometimes it's really lonely. And so I think that we should all help each other and share our wisdom and share the things that we've learned along the way. And I would absolutely love to help anybody that feels like they could use it.
So how can our listeners find you then? They can probably find you on LinkedIn. I know that.
Yes, they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share my email if you feel like that would be good. My email is just aturner@austinretina.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn, Amanda Turner.
Perfect. All right. Well, suddenly you're going to get an influx of people from all over the country emailing you, asking you to break it down for them so that they can turn
Yeah,
their culture around.
I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for joining us today and talking to us about cultivating a culture of feedback and communication. We appreciate it very much. I also want to take a moment to thank our listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you. We cannot do what we do without you. If you like our podcast, kindly share it with your friends and on social media. Also, please don't forget to write a review on iTunes or Google Play. Your reviews will help other doctors and practice owners find us. Till we meet again, wishing all of you an amazing week ahead.